Thank you very much. My idea that I wish I'd thought of is filling in the small gaps in our living style in which we can raise more money. It's about Pennies, the digital charity box. I should say, rather than the way they do on the Radio Times, other digital giving boxes are available. But the reason I think it's particularly important is that particularly in an era when it becomes increasingly hard to talk directly to donors, this is a way that bypasses all of that and talks to you at the till, at the point of sale, and persuades you seamlessly to give very small amounts of money. So the idea is that it brings the 21st century tin rattling into the digital world. It allows people to give money wherever and whenever they use a credit card. And in a world that is moving to be increasingly cashless, that becomes increasingly important. So it's quick and anonymous, which some of you may like and some of you may not. It increasingly used in all sorts of retail payment systems, and it's easy for retailers to enable and operate. And you don't have a slowdown in transaction time. It is utterly seamless, but it still gives people the choice. Nothing is forced. Non-cash payments now outnumber cash. So one of the challenges we have in a world in which the collecting tin is increasingly redundant, in which people no longer have the cash to which to give or want to give, we need to move into the equivalent in the digital, the online, the retail world. And in particularly the younger age groups, the 35 to 44s, are regularly leaving the house without any cash whatsoever. And of course, contactless cards are beginning to make that even more important. And in the youngest of all demographics, the 25 to 34-year-olds, cash is really something of the past in a complete and utter way. What you then discover is that people like this kind of giving because it's got low pressure, it's got a very easy way to donate, and people may be giving several times a day by topping up. So what happens is you go to your till, it says, would you like to give to XYZ? It tells you how much it would be giving. You tick the yes box or the no box, and then on your till it'll say thank you. And actually you can do this online as well as physically. So some of you may have seen this with Domino's Pizza, as if you're wise or foolish enough to order Domino's Pizzas online, or Travelodge, or a number of other partners. But what it does mean is that you're in a situation in which whatever the route, you can have that rounding up. Now the challenge, of course, is that you don't necessarily get involved unless you can persuade some of the retailers to get involved. So part of my message today is for corporate fundraisers to persuade their retail partners to get involved. Domino's is a good example of an organization who has taken the pennies notion to heart. And in fact, what it's done is raised £2.7 million and 13 million donations since they started working with pennies. And the issue here, of course, is this is not something that the company necessarily has to give any money at all. You're not persuading them to part with their profits, you're actually persuading their customers. And that is absolutely in tune with the way that corporate partnerships are increasingly working. You can do it online, or you can do it through the place where you buy in the actual shops as well. And they've also had long-term charity partners to give to, Rays of Sunshine, Teenage Cancer Trust and Comic Relief. And so they have allowed it to be campaignable. And I'll come back to that point later on. The Entertainer, a toy box which is somewhat different from Toys R Us for those who've never been there. But again, it has taken the same approach. And what they discovered is that they raised more in their first week with pennies in 2011 than they had done in the previous several years of having the cash-based boxes. So 1.4 million raised from 3.5 million donations. The average donation, 39p. 50% of customers invited to round up have donated. A response rate of 50% is pretty phenomenal by anybody's standards. And you can then have an email and an in-store thank you again. So depending on what mechanism you use, depending on how much you find out about it. So what people have discovered when they've taken up this mechanism is that cash becomes increasingly something that doesn't work, whereas the online and the retail space does. But the tragedy, in my view, is that whilst you have a whole range of keeping in touch with donors and the people who give to you through Facebook, through social media, actually the number of partners, I think, is still relatively limited. Because the potential is massive. If every UK card holder donated 30p a month, 175 million would be donated this year. And that's just 30p a month. If you then multiply that by 10, for 10 donations per month, and if you think how often you use your credit cards, that's a huge amount of money. These are the people who have signed up to pennies so far, and my challenge would be it's perhaps not big enough. We don't have enough of the big household name organizations to make it really work. So I think there's all sorts of potential for corporate fundraising to make this work even harder. So if we think about micro donations for a moment, imagine you were Tesco's. All your national charity partners would be the default organisation. You could have time-limited appeals for things like Poppy Week, DEC appeals, Comic Relief, Christian Aid Week, and so on. Maybe a store could choose their individual local partners with whom they want to work with. And then staff could also choose their partners too. So it becomes a campaignable device for people to work with their corporate partners to raise more money, rather than just a static collecting box. It can be continuously changing to make sure customers and staff keep the whole idea fresh and alive. And then we have the bigger picture. You can't get gift aid on these donations. So I think we should be pushing for automatic gift donations, for gift aid for any donation under £5. You could have more major retailers on board, because if Tesco's took this on board, or Sainsbury's or the other big retailers, and use these kind of mechanisms, Sainsbury's has a proprietary one, you could raise a vast amount more money. And we could then have credit cards that were programmed to auto top up, so you wouldn't even need to be asked. And then the last thing is that we need to make sure that all of you build micro donations into your thinking, particularly on corporate partnerships. The challenge that we have is too many people still think they've got to raise £10 or more to make it worthwhile. We have to program online micro donations into our thinking to open up a whole new avenue for individual organizations to raise more money. Thank you very much.